Hello, welcome back. In this video, I'll begin explaining the history of HTTP and REST by telling you a story of sharing data between computers, aka how the internet works. The fact that you're watching this presentation right now tells me that at some point in your life you've used a browser to load up a website. Let's say you want to look up a blog post. How do you get a blog post on your computer? It turns out you need to request that blog post from another computer somewhere in the world. In order to get this blog post from a specific computer, you're somehow going to have to find the IP address of that computer and reach out using the infrastructure of the internet until a series of routers and name resolution servers can help you locate the exact computer you're looking for, and then establish a persistent connection between your computer and that computer over the network that you can use to exchange bytes between each other. That connection is done using the network interface or the network card on your computer. So this is a piece of hardware we're talking about. And the most common type of connection today is a TCP connection. All right, so once you have a two-way connection established with some target computer, you can now freely exchange bytes back and forth with that computer. But just because you can send bytes to a computer doesn't mean the computer knows what it's supposed to do with the bytes that you're giving it. I mean, bytes are a set of ones and zeros. You send those over the wire to this target computer. How is the target computer supposed to go from, okay, thanks for these ones and zeros, I can see that you're trying to request a blog post, let me send it back to you. And even if the computer did start sending the blog post back, again, that blog post is going to be represented in ones and zeros. How is our computer supposed to know how to decode those into something like text that it can display back to us? Our computers need a common language that they can speak in bytes. Or in other words, a common protocol. You know the droid C-3PO from Star Wars? They call him a protocol droid. And C-3PO is always talking about how he knows millions of regional dialects from different species across the galaxy, and he can talk to them. So protocol acts as a language. And on Wikipedia, another definition of protocol is a formal agreement between nation states, or the etiquette of diplomacy and affairs of state. What is etiquette? Etiquette is the set of norms of personal behavior in polite society. I don't think the author of this page had computer networks in mind when they wrote this definition of etiquette, but it's actually a really good definition, even when we're talking about computer networking. If I'm going to send you a bunch of bytes, we should probably agree on some norms or standards that we're going to follow with our bytes so that you know what to do with them when I send them to you. This is the purpose of the Hypertext Transfer Protocol, HTTP, which is the most common protocol that computers use to send and request data, especially documents, back and forth between each other. The story of HTTP is pretty cool. Let me tell it to you quickly. In 1990, there was an engineer/scientist named Sir Tim Berners-Lee. I don't know if he was a sir back then. And he had this ambitious project in mind that would be a computer network that people could use to freely exchange information, such as research, between each other. In very little time, Tim Berners-Lee invented HTML and something called the URL system and HTTP, although he did that in collaboration with some others. And I'd like to talk about at least one of those collaborators here in a second. But first, what is HTML? Well, if you're watching this video, I'm sure you've at least seen some HTML before. But yes, it's a text format that uses these angle brackets called elements. And if a browser is able to download a page in HTML format, it can render that in a more aesthetically pleasing way, aka as a web page. Okay, it's hypertext markup language. You can see here that it's text, but what is a markup language? A markup language is basically a language where you can mix text with metadata about how that text should be displayed. So a markup language is some sort of text language that's meant to be processed and displayed later. And you can see this markup language here is rendered in a much prettier way over here on the left in actual wikipedia.com. But what does the H stand for? Why is it hypertext and not just text? Hyper refers to the property of this text document of it having links to many other text documents. And Wikipedia is a fantastic example of this because look, when you go to a Wikipedia page, it's got links to all kinds of other Wikipedia pages. Because it has these links to other Wikipedia pages, or specifically to other text files, this text file is a hypertext file. And more generally, beyond just hypertext, there is also hypermedia, which could be video, audio, or any digital format that also comes with links to other media files. We'll come back to the definition of hypermedia The reason I spent so long talking about what is hypertext and hypermedia is because hypermedia is actually fundamental to the definition of what REST is. And so we're going to be coming back to this definition later. What is HTTP? Specifically, HTTP was a protocol for transferring these hypertext files back and forth. And some people have said that HTTP is a bad name. It should be HMTP for Hypermedia Transfer Protocol instead of Hypertext Transfer Protocol, because HTTP can be used to transfer many more media types than just text or hypertext. It can actually be used to transfer any sort of arbitrary bytes, which include video and audio and all the other digital formats you can think of. Okay, so this is Tim Berners-Lee. Another key player in the formation of HTTP is Roy Fielding, who, by the way, you can find on LinkedIn today. In 1996, Roy Fielding was a graduate student at the University of California, Irvine, and he wasn't even studying computer networking, and yet he found time to write this document in collaboration with Tim Berners-Lee. This is a landmark document, and I think this is an important topic, so before we can even talk more about what this document is and why it's important, I need to explain what is an RFC. It's actually going to take a bit of time to tell you what an RFC is, though, and so let's break for another video dedicated to RFCs. And when we're done with that video, we'll come back to the story of the internet and HTTP and REST, and then we'll be in a good place to talk about the design principles from HTTP and REST that we are and are not going to be adopting in this course, and then we can move on with implementation in the course project. I will see you in the next video.